We are in the ruins of a luxurious Roman villa in Pompeii, frozen in time. The floors are decorated with magnificent, intricate mosaics. In the corner of a grand dining room sits an elegant, small ceramic jar, an archaeus. Its contents were once among the most precious and desirable substances in the Roman Empire, a fixture on the tables of emperors and a staple for the common soldier. Yet it was the product of a process so notoriously foul-smelling, so viscerally unpleasant, that Roman law explicitly forbade its production within the city walls. This is the story of that substance, garum, the infamous Roman fish sauce. This documentary will investigate how a fetid concoction of fermented fish guts became the signature flavor of a civilization, the foundation of a multi-million sestertii industrial enterprise, and a testament to the surprising sophistication of the Roman consumer economy. To understand the Roman world, one must first understand the Roman palate. It was a palate that craved flavors that were loud, complex, and intensely savory. They did not have chili for heat or sugar for sweetness in the way we do. Instead, their cuisine was built on a foundation of salty, funky, fermented tastes, a deep, protein-rich flavor that we would today call umami. And the undisputed king of that flavor profile was garum. It was the Roman ketchup, Worcestershire sauce, and fish stock all rolled into one, an indispensable, ubiquitous liquid that found its way into nearly every dish, from the most lavish imperial banquets to the humble gruel of a legionary on the frontier. But to dismiss garum as a simple fish sauce is to fundamentally misunderstand its role in the Roman world. It was far more than a condiment. It was a massively produced industrial commodity, a stable and easily transportable source of essential salt and proteins for a vast pre-industrial population. In a world where food preservation was a matter of life and death, garum was a triumph of food technology. And the business that grew around it reveals a side of the Roman economy that is often overlooked. Not the state-controlled grain dole of the Annona, but a dynamic, competitive, and largely private sector industry, complete with regional specialties, sophisticated branding, and a continent-wide distribution network. This investigation will deconstruct this incredible industrial machine. We will follow the journey of garum from the sea to the table. We will explore the great fishing grounds of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean that provided the raw materials. We will descend into the archaeological remains of the massive coastal factories with their giant stone vats and uncover the precise, controlled biochemical science of fermentation that the Romans mastered. We will decode the secrets of the shipping amphoras, the ancient barcodes that reveal a complex world of corporate branding, quality control, and long-distance ancient trade logistics. We will meet the garum barons, the private entrepreneurs who built immense fortunes from this stinking but profitable enterprise. Finally, we will explore why a flavor that once defined an empire has now completely vanished from our world. The story of garum is the story of a lost taste, but it is also a remarkable window into the surprising modernity of the Roman world. It reveals a complex consumer market, a genius for mass production, and an economy built not just on conquest and grain, but on the very human business of flavor.
The modern palate has been conditioned by centuries of access to global spices, and above all, refined sugar. We crave the sweet. But to understand the Roman world, we must imagine a different sensory landscape, a culinary universe built on a different set of primary desires. The Roman table was a place of bold, powerful, and often jarring flavors: sour wines, bitter herbs, and, above all, an intense, penetrating saltiness. Central to this flavor profile was a deep, savory, almost meaty taste that the Japanese would 2,000 years later christen umami. It is the taste of glutamates, the fifth taste, and the Romans were utterly obsessed with it. This obsession was the cultural and biological engine that drove the immense garum economy. The demand was not a passing fad. It was a deep-seated, civilization-wide craving that made garum as essential to the Roman kitchen as salt is to our own. The Romans were not the first to invent fermented fish sauce. The Greeks had a version called gyros, and similar condiments have been a staple of Southeast Asian cuisine for millennia, in the form of modern nuochmam or nam pla. But it was the Romans who took this basic concept and elevated it into an empire-wide culinary necessity. They refined its production, they categorized its quality, and they integrated it into every conceivable type of dish. The famous and famously decadent cookbook attributed to the gourmand Apicius de Re Coquinaria provides a stunning window into the sauce's ubiquity in the kitchens of the elite. Garum appears in nearly every recipe. It was used as a finishing salt for roasted meats, as the base for complex sauces for seafood, as a dressing for simple vegetables, and even, bizarrely, in some sweet dishes, where its salty kick was used to heighten the flavor of fruits and custards. But garum's role was not just to add saltiness. The process of fermentation, which we will explore in detail, did something magical. It broke down the complex proteins in the fish into their constituent amino acids, most notably glutamic acid. When we taste glutamates, our brains register a deep, savory, satisfying flavor. It is the taste of a perfectly seared steak, of a rich mushroom soup, of aged Parmesan cheese. Garum was a liquid concentrate of this very sensation. It added a profound depth and complexity to dishes, a meaty richness that could not be achieved otherwise. For the Roman chef, it was a secret weapon, an indispensable tool for creating the bold and powerful flavors that their patrons craved. This desire for an intense, savory flavor was so great that the Romans were willing to pay almost any price for the most potent flavor enhancers. The most famous example is the now extinct plant Sylphidium, which grew only in a narrow coastal band of Libya. Its resin was so desired as a spice and medicine that it was, at times, worth its weight in silver. The Romans literally loved it to extinction. Garum in many ways filled the same role, but with one crucial difference. It was a manufactured good. Its supply was not limited by the whims of a rare plant's biology. As long as there were fish in the sea and salt on the shore, the Roman industrial machine could produce garum. This made it the reliable, scalable, and ultimately more important flavor foundation of their entire culinary world. Beyond the gourmet tastes of the elite, garum served a far more fundamental purpose for the vast majority of the empire's population: nutrition. The average Roman diet was bland and often protein deficient, consisting largely of wheat or barley porridge, pulse. Garum was a nutritional powerhouse. The fermentation process that released the glutamates also made the fish's proteins more easily digestible. Even the cheapest forms of the sauce was an excellent source of protein, minerals, and, crucially, salt. A simple splash of the lowest grade garum, called alec, stirred into a bowl of bland porridge would transform it. It would make it not only palatable, but also far more nutritious, providing essential amino acids and electrolytes. This was a vital nutritional supplement for the urban poor, for rural farmers, and especially for the soldiers of the Roman legions. The Roman state understood this perfectly. Just as soldiers were supplied with a grain ration, they were also supplied with salt and very often with cheap garum, a simple and effective way to ensure the health and morale of the fighting force. This nutritional necessity created a massive, stable, and permanent base of demand for the product, the bedrock of the entire garum economy. It was this dual identity, as both a high-end luxury for the rich and a vital nutritional supplement for the masses, that made garum a commodity of truly universal importance, and its production a business of immense scale and profitability. Every great industrial enterprise is built upon a reliable and abundant supply of raw materials. For the garum factories of Rome, that raw material was the sea itself and the immense, teeming biomass it contained. The production of garum was not a delicate art of a few prized fish. It was a voracious, industrial-scale harvest that consumed entire ecosystems, a testament to the Roman ability to systematically exploit the natural world. The type of fish used, the location of the fisheries, and the sheer scale of the catch were all critical factors in the economy of this ancient industry, determining the quality, the price, and the ultimate profitability of the empire's favorite flavor. The beauty of the garum process was its versatility. Almost any type of sea creature could be used. For the cheapest mass-market varieties, the producers would use whole, small, oily fish that were abundant and easy to catch in massive quantities. Fish like anchovies, sardines, and sprats were ideal. These were often fish that were considered too small, too bony, or too strong-flavored for direct consumption, but their high oil and enzyme content made them perfect for fermentation. Entire shoals of these fish would be netted and, without being gutted or cleaned, would be thrown directly into the great salting vats. This was the bulk product, the nutritional staple destined for the bowls of the poor and the canteens of the legions. But the garum industry also had its high-end, a luxury market that demanded a more refined and specific product. The most prized and expensive varieties of garum were not made from whole fish, but from a very specific and seemingly wasteful set of ingredients, the blood and internal organs of larger, more valuable fish. The undisputed king of this high-end market was the Atlantic mackerel, or Scumber scombrus. The entrails, gills, and most importantly, the blood of the mackerel were considered to produce a garum of unparalleled quality, flavor, and color. This specialized sauce was known as Garum Sociorum, or Garum of the Allies, a name that likely originated as a brand for the product of a specific trading company, Societas, operating in Spain. Its quality was so legendary that its name became a generic trademark for the best garum money could buy, a signifier of the highest possible status. The even more luxurious, top-tier product was made from the same parts of the mighty Atlantic blue tuna. The annual tuna migration was a major event in the ancient Mediterranean. Great shoals of these colossal fish would swim from the Atlantic through the Strait of Gibraltar to spawn in the warmer waters of the Mediterranean. This created a predictable, seasonal, and immensely profitable fishing industry. While the meat of the tuna was a valuable commodity in itself, often salted and preserved, the garum producers saw a river of liquid gold in its waste products. The blood and viscera were carefully separated and fermented to create a potent, blood-red garum, a delicacy so expensive it was reserved for the tables of the super-rich. This specialization reveals the incredible sophistication of the Roman economy. They had created a vertically integrated industry where even the waste products of one process, tuna preservation, became the highly prized raw material for another, even more profitable, luxury industry. The geography of this harvest was critical. While garum was produced in small quantities all across the empire, from the Black Sea to the coast of Britain, a few key regions emerged as the industrial heartlands of production, the Silicon Valleys of fish sauce. The most important of these was the province of Hispania Baica, on the southern coast of Spain. Here, the confluence of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean created a uniquely fertile marine ecosystem, the perfect environment for the great shoals of mackerel and the migrating tuna. The coastline around the Strait of Gibraltar, particularly near cities like Gades, Malacca, and Cartaya, became the epicenter of the garum sociorum industry. The wealth generated from this trade was so immense, it transformed the entire province into one of the richest and most urbanized in the Roman Empire. Other major production centers included the coasts of North Africa, particularly in what is now modern Morocco and Tunisia, as well as the shores of Sicily and the Balearic Islands. What all these regions had in common was a perfect combination of three essential resources. First, direct access to the rich fisheries of the Atlantic-Mediterranean passage. Second, a hot, reliable sun, the engine of the fermentation process. And third, access to vast quantities of salt, either from coastal salt pans or nearby rock salt. These regions became the great factory floors of the garum trade, their coastlines dotted with hundreds of production sites, from small family-run operations to massive industrial complexes. The sheer scale of the fishing effort required to supply these factories is hard to overstate. It would have employed tens of thousands of fishermen, net makers, and sailors, a vast maritime workforce dedicated to harvesting the guts of the ocean to satisfy an empire's insatiable craving.
To the uninitiated, the process of making garum sounds like a recipe for poison. Piles of fish, guts, blood, and salt are left to sit under a hot sun for months. The resulting stench was so notoriously powerful that, as we have noted, Roman municipal law forbade its production within the city limits. But this was not a process of simple, uncontrolled rotting. The Roman garum producers, through generations of trial and error, had unknowingly stumbled upon and perfected a sophisticated biochemical process. They were not artisans of decay. They were the masters of a controlled enzymatic fermentation called autolysis. This was a form of ancient food technology, a repeatable, scalable industrial science that transformed a foul-smelling raw material into a stable, safe, and deeply flavorful product, the very cornerstone of the Roman food economy. The entire process began on the factory floor, at the great coastal installations known as sitari. These were not simple sheds, they were purpose-built industrial sites. The defining feature of a sitari was a series of large, stone or tile-lined vats, or tanks, built directly into the ground. These tanks, which archaeologists have unearthed in their hundreds along the Spanish and North African coasts, were the fermentation chambers of the ancient world. Their size is a testament to the industrial scale of the operation. Some of the largest vats could hold thousands of gallons. Their interiors were often coated with opus signinum, a type of waterproof Roman concrete made with crushed pottery, ensuring that none of the precious and pungent liquid would be lost to seepage. Into these vats, the factory workers would place their raw materials in a precise and carefully managed sequence. The process began with a layer of aromatic herbs, which likely served both to add subtle flavor notes and to act as a mild antibacterial agent. Then came the fish. For cheap alec, this would be whole anchovies and sardines. For high-end garum sociorum, it would be the blood and entrails of mackerel and tuna. The fish was not cooked, but was left raw, a critical detail for the chemical process to work. Over this layer of fish, a thick layer of coarse salt was added. The ratio of salt to fish was the most crucial variable in the entire process, the master dyer's greatest secret. Too little salt, and the mixture would be vulnerable to putrefying bacteria, leading to a truly rotten, toxic, and worthless product. Too much salt, and the enzymatic process would be inhibited, preventing the creation of the deep, complex flavors. The ideal ratio was a closely guarded trade secret, likely varying between producers and recipes, and was the key to their brand's unique identity.
The workers would continue to build up these alternating layers of fish and salt until the vat was full. Once filled, the vats were left open to the most important and cheapest piece of equipment in the factory, the Mediterranean sun. The gentle, consistent heat of the sun was the engine of the entire process. It warmed the mixture to the perfect temperature, not hot enough to cook it, but warm enough to dramatically accelerate the chemical reactions within. This is where the magic of autolysis began. The powerful digestive enzymes naturally present in the fish's own gut, particularly in the intestines and viscera, began to break down the fish's own tissues. The fish, in essence, began to digest itself from the inside out. This was not bacterial putrefaction. The high concentration of salt created a hypersaline environment, an osmotic pressure so great that it killed most of the common spoilage bacteria. But the fish's own internal enzymes were adapted to a salty environment and could continue to function. For a period of 1 to 3 months, these enzymes worked relentlessly, breaking down the complex proteins into simpler amino acids and peptides. The solid tissues of the fish would slowly liquefy, creating a rich, protein-dense brownish liquid. The sun's heat drove this process, and workers would periodically stir the pungent mash with long poles to ensure the fermentation was even. After the fermentation was complete, the final stage of extraction began. The liquid was carefully drained from the vats. The first, finest, and most translucent liquid drawn off the top was the most valuable product, the floss gari, or flour of garum, a delicate, amber-colored sauce that would command the highest price. The main body of the liquid, the standard-grade garum, was then drained and strained through tightly woven baskets to remove the solid fish particles. This liquid was the primary product of the ancient trade. What remained was a thick, sludgy paste of fish bones and undigested solids. This was alec, the cheapest and most pungent byproduct, which was sold as a nutritional supplement to the poor and the army. In this remarkably efficient industrial process, nothing was wasted. The Romans had created a system that, from a single batch of raw material, could produce a tiered range of products for every segment of the consumer economy.
The literary accounts of Garum are tantalizing. The biochemistry is fascinating. But to truly comprehend the staggering scale and revolutionary nature of the Roman fish sauce industry, we must leave the texts and laboratories behind. We must travel to the sun-drenched southern coast of Spain, in the Roman province of Hispania Baetica. Here, scattered along the coastline from the Strait of Gibraltar to the city of Cadiz, lie the silent, monumental ruins of the great garum factories. This was the Garum Coast, the industrial heartland of the entire Roman fish sauce economy. The archaeological remains found here, particularly at spectacular sites like Baelo Claudia, provide the irrefutable physical proof that garum production was not a quaint coastal craft, but a true industrial revolution, an enterprise of a size and sophistication that challenges our every assumption about the limits of the ancient trade and its technological capabilities. The key to this region's dominance was its perfect geography. The coast of Baetica was the nexus point of the entire ancient maritime world. It was here that the cool, nutrient-rich waters of the Atlantic met the warmer, saltier waters of the Mediterranean. This created an incredibly fertile marine ecosystem, a paradise for the very fish that were the bloodline of the garum industry. Most importantly, this was the channel through which the massive annual migration of Atlantic blue-tune tuna had to pass. For a few crucial months every year, the waters off this coast would be thick with a river of these colossal fish, a predictable and seemingly inexhaustible supply of the most prized raw material for the highest grades of garum. This natural annual bounty was the foundation upon which an industrial empire would be built. The most spectacular of these factory towns is Baelo Claudia. Nestled in a beautiful bay, it was not a great political capital or a military fortress. It was a city built for one purpose: the industrial processing of marine resources.
The ruins of Baelo Claudia are a perfectly preserved snapshot of the garum industry. The most dominant feature of the site is the vast salting complex, the Setarie. Here, archaeologists have unearthed a series of massive stone-lined fermentation vats arranged in a neat, factory-like grid. These are not small pits, they are industrial-scale reactors. Some are the size of a small swimming pool, capable of holding many thousands of gallons of fish, salt, and water. Standing on the edge of one of these vats, one can almost feel the heat of the Roman sun and smell the phantom stench of the tons of fish that fermented here for months on end. This was a facility designed for mass production on a truly astonishing scale. The layout of the entire city was dictated by the logic of this industry. The factory complex was situated right on the beach front, allowing for the immediate and efficient processing of the catch as it was brought ashore by the fishing fleet. Adjacent to the vats were the facilities for manufacturing the other essential components of the trade. There were workshops for weaving the nets and baskets used for fishing and straining the sauce. There were kilns for firing the millions of ceramic amphora that would be needed to transport the finished product. And there were warehouses for storing the salt, the finished amphora, and the raw materials. Baelo Claudia was a vertically integrated industrial zone, a place that controlled almost every step of the supply chain, from the catching of the fish to the sealing of the final branded container. This level of industrial organization is a hallmark of a truly advanced and mature economy. The evidence from Baelo Claudia and other sites along the Garum Coast allows us to calculate the potential output of this industry, and the numbers are staggering. A single large vat could produce thousands of gallons of garum from a single batch. A factory complex with dozens of such vats would have an annual output measured in the tens of thousands of gallons. When you multiply this by the hundreds of known production sites that dotted the coasts of Spain and North Africa, the total volume of this trade becomes clear. This was an industry that was processing not just thousands, but likely millions of tons of fish every single year. It was a maritime harvest of an almost unimaginable magnitude, an industrial-scale exploitation of the ocean's resources that would not be seen again until the modern era. The wealth generated by this industry transformed the entire region. Cities like Gares became some of the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan in the entire Roman Empire. Their prosperity built on the foul-smelling but immensely profitable business of fermented fish. The producers and merchants of the Garum Coast became a powerful economic elite. Their fortunes made not from land or political office, but from private enterprise and industrial innovation. The silent, empty vats of Baelo Claudia are therefore more than just archaeological curiosities. They are the physical proof of Roman capitalism in action. They are the fossilized remains of a sophisticated, market-driven, and truly industrial food processing economy, a forgotten revolution that flavored an empire.
The fermentation vats of the Garum Coast had produced a river of liquid gold. But to transform this pungent local product into a pan-continental commodity required another masterpiece of Roman industrial design and logistics, the shipping amphora. These humble, robust, and brilliantly functional terracotta jars were the lifeblood of the Roman economy, the ancient equivalent of the modern shipping container. For the garum trade, a specific type of small, pot-bellied amphora known as ursius was developed. But these jars were far more than simple containers. They were a sophisticated platform for branding, quality control, and marketing. And the painted labels found upon them, the tituli picti, are a priceless treasure trove of information, a secret code that allows us to decode the immense complexity and surprising modernity of the garum ancient trade. The amphora itself was a marvel of practical engineering. Made from cheap and abundant clay, it could be mass-produced in industrial-scale kilns located near the garum factories. Its distinctive shape, a thick-walled, rounded body, two sturdy handles, and a pointed base, was the result of centuries of refinement.
The pointed base, while seemingly impractical, was a brilliant design feature. It allowed the jars to be packed tightly together in the sandy ballast of a ship's hold, nestled in a honeycomb pattern that maximized space and minimized the risk of breakage during a rough sea voyage. Once they reached their destination, the pointed base could be set into the ground or placed in a special stand for stability. After being filled with the precious sauce, the top of the amphora would be sealed with a cork or ceramic stopper and made airtight with a layer of pozzolanic mortar, ensuring the product would remain stable and safe for consumption for years. But what truly transforms these jars from simple containers into historical documents are the painted labels, the tituli picti. These were not crude markings. They were a standardized system of commercial information painted onto the shoulder of the amphora in black or red ink by a specialized scribe or pictor. These labels were in essence the ancient world's barcode and brand label rolled into one. They contained a wealth of information that reveals a startlingly sophisticated consumer economy. A typical label would include the contents of the jar, for example, garum, or the more specific, liquamen, and often a qualifier of its quality. A jar might be marked floss, for the finest floss gari, or optimum, meaning excellent. This was a clear system of product grading, allowing a discerning consumer in Rome to know exactly what they were buying. Even more remarkably, the tituli picti almost always included the name of the producer, the garum baron who had manufactured the sauce. This is the undeniable proof of corporate branding in the Roman world. A name like Aulus Umbricus Scours or Gaius Atenius Celer was not just a name, it was a brand, a guarantee of a specific taste and quality that a consumer could recognize and trust. Just as a modern shopper might look for a specific brand of olive oil, a Roman chef or steward would have looked for the amphora of his preferred garum producer. This brand recognition was a powerful economic tool. It fostered competition, encouraged quality control, and created brand loyalty in a market that was flooded with products of varying quality. The most successful of these producers even developed their own logos. The family of Aulus Umbricus Scours, the king of garum in Pompeii, had a distinctive brand mark. A mosaic in their villa's atrium proudly depicted an Ursius bearing their family name and a visual logo of a tuna fish, a clear advertisement for their high-quality tuna-based sauce. This was sophisticated marketing, an attempt to create a visual identity that could be recognized even by illiterate customers. Some labels even included the name of the specific slave or freedman who was the master producer of that particular batch, a sign of extreme quality control and perhaps a form of internal pride and competition within the factory itself. The labels also contained vital logistical information. They would often include the weight of the empty jar, tara, and the net weight of the contents, ensuring that merchants were not being cheated. Some even included the age of the sauce, with labels like vetus, meaning old, indicating a product that had been aged for a year or more, likely commanding a higher price. And finally, they would include codes and marks from the various customs officials and merchants who had handled the jar on its long journey, allowing us to trace its path from the factory in Spain to a military barracks on Hadrian's Wall in Britain. These humble painted labels are therefore the secret language of the Roman consumer economy. They prove that the trade in garum was not an anonymous bulk commodity business. It was a competitive, brand-driven, and highly regulated market. It reveals a world of discerning consumers who cared about quality and brand identity, and a class of sophisticated producers who used marketing and quality control as tools to dominate that market. The amphora was not just a jar, it was the final, brilliant piece of technology and an industrial process that connected the factory floor to the consumer's table, a silent witness to the hidden complexities of the Roman world.
The industrial machine of the Garum Coast produced a river of fish sauce that flowed into every corner of the Roman world. But who was drinking this river and how? The ultimate success of garum was not just its scale of production, but its incredible social and culinary penetration. This was a flavor that knew no class boundaries. It was a ubiquitous presence, found in the most lavish multi-course banquets of the emperor and in the meager one-pot meals of the common soldier on the frontier. The Roman garum industry had achieved a holy grail of any consumer product. It had created a tiered market that could satisfy the entire demographic spectrum, from the connoisseur to the commoner. To understand the taste of Rome, one must understand that in one form or another, almost everything tasted of garum. At the absolute pinnacle of the market were the ultra-refined, eye-wateringly expensive varieties of the sauce. The most prized of all was Garum sociorum, the legendary product of the Spanish mackerel fisheries. This was the dom prignon of fish sauces, a commodity so valuable that its name alone was a byword for quality and extreme luxury. Even more refined was the first liquid drawn off during the fermentation process, the flos garai, or flour of garum. This was the purest and most delicate expression of the flavor, likely with a clear amber color and a clean, intensely savory taste. These were the sauces that graced the tables of the Caesars and the villas of the senatorial class. They were not just ingredients, they were status symbols in themselves. Their presence on the table a clear signal of the host's immense wealth and sophisticated palate. The gourmand Apicius would have used nothing less. In the hands of an elite Roman chef, these high-end sauces were tools of incredible versatility. The goal was not to make everything taste fishy, but to add a deep, savory umami foundation that elevated all the other flavors in a dish. In a recipe for a rich meat stew, a splash of Garum sociorum would have added a profound, meaty depth that the meat alone could not provide. In a sauce for grilled fish or shellfish, it would amplify the natural flavors of the sea. It was used to create complex sweet and sour glazes for roasted boar or dormice, balancing the sweetness of honey with its own savory kick. It was even used in desserts, where a few drops in a fruit compote or a custard would have functioned much like a pinch of salt does in modern baking, suppressing bitterness and making the sweet flavors seem brighter and more intense. For the Roman epicure, garum was the secret to a complex, layered, and powerful culinary experience, the very essence of a sophisticated economy of taste. But the vast majority of the garum produced was not destined for the emperor's table. The bulk of the industry's output was the standard-grade garum, and even more so, its cheap and pungent byproduct, alec. Alec was the thick, sludgy paste of undigested fish bones, scales, and solids that was left at the bottom of the fermentation vats. While the elite would have turned their noses up at it, for the common people of the Roman Empire, alec was a nutritional godsend. It was incredibly cheap, widely available, and packed with protein, calcium, and essential salts. For the urban plebs of Rome, living on a simple diet of wheat porridge, or for a poor farmer in the countryside, a spoonful of alec was a vital dietary supplement. It transformed a bland, nutrient-poor meal into something both flavorful and life-sustaining. This was the true volume market, the foundation of the garum industry's immense profitability. Nowhere was this mass market role more important than in the Roman army. The logistics of feeding hundreds of thousands of soldiers stationed across a vast empire was one of the Roman state's greatest challenges. The legionary diet was built for efficiency: grain, sour wine, olive oil, and salt. Garum or alec was the perfect addition to this basic ration. It was a preserved, easily transportable, and non-perishable source of protein and vital electrolytes. A legionary on Hadrian's Wall facing the cold mists of Britain could add a splash of alec from Spain to his porridge and get a taste of the Mediterranean sun, along with a vital nutritional boost. Archaeologists have found the remains of garum amphora at Roman military sites across the empire, from the deserts of Syria to the forests of Germany. The trade in this commodity was an essential component of the military supply chain, a tool that helped to keep the empire's fighting force healthy and effective. This incredible market penetration from the palace to the barracks is the true secret of the garum industry's success. It was a product that had successfully captured every segment of the consumer economy. The immense profits from selling a small quantity of ultra-premium Garum sociorum to a senator could subsidize the mass production of the cheap alec that fed the masses. It was a perfectly balanced business model, a commercial empire built on a single, universally desired, and endlessly adaptable flavor.
The story of garum is not just the story of a product. It is the story of the people who made it and the immense fortunes they accumulated. The Roman world is often remembered for its state-run projects, the legions, the aqueducts, the great grain dole of the Annona. But the garum industry represents the other side of the Roman economy, a dynamic, competitive, and overwhelmingly private sector world of capitalism and entrepreneurship. The men who owned the factories, the ships, and the brand names were not senators or generals. They were businessmen. They were the garum barons, a powerful class of industrialists whose personal wealth could rival that of the old landed aristocracy, and whose influence could shape the very fabric of their local societies. Their story is a powerful case study in Roman private enterprise. Unlike the grain trade, which was deemed too strategically vital to be left to the free market, the production and trade of garum was, for the most part, a private affair. An ambitious individual with access to capital could build or lease a factory, hire the workers, contract with the local fishing fleets, and begin producing their own brand of fish sauce. This was a high-risk, high-reward venture. It required a significant upfront investment and a deep understanding of a complex industrial process. A mistake in the recipe, a bad fishing season, or a lost shipment at sea could mean financial ruin. But for those who succeeded, the profits were astronomical. The garum trade was one of the great engines of social and economic mobility in the Roman Empire, a way for a clever and ambitious man, even one from a humble background, to accumulate a fortune. The most vivid and perfectly preserved example of one of these garum barons comes from the doomed city of Pompeii. His name was Aulus Umbricius Scaurus. He was not a senator or a great landowner. He was a negotiator, a businessman, likely a freedman or the son of a freedman, who built a commercial empire on the back of fermented fish. Scaurus was without question the undisputed king of the Pompeian garum market. His name and his products are everywhere in the archaeological record of the city, a testament to his market dominance and his genius for self-promotion. Archaeologists have found dozens of the small urchae, the jars used for local retail, bearing his name. The tituli picti painted on these jars are a masterclass in branding. They proclaim the contents as the flour of garum, made from mackerel, and most importantly, from the workshop of Scaurus, or ex officina Scauri. He was so proud of his premium garum sociorum that his labels often declared it, a clear sign that he was competing with the famous Spanish producers. This was a man who understood the power of a brand name and used it to command a premium price for his products. He was the Heinz or the Tabasco of his day, his name a guarantee of quality. But Scaurus' genius for marketing went beyond the jars themselves. In the heart of Pompeii, at the home of his family, he created one of the most remarkable pieces of commercial advertising in the ancient world. In the atrium of his magnificent villa, the floor is decorated with a beautiful and unmistakable mosaic. It depicts 4 different garum urchae, one at each corner of the central pool. Each jar is rendered in detail, and each one bears a painted label. One reads G, F, SCOMBRI, SCAURI, or the flour of garum, made from mackerel, from Scaurus. Another reads LIQUAMINS FLOS, the flour of liquamen. This was not just a piece of art, it was a proud, permanent, and incredibly expensive advertisement placed at the very entrance of his home for every client and visitor to see. It was the ultimate statement of a self-made man whose immense wealth and civic pride were inextricably linked to his industrial enterprise. The wealth that Scaurus accumulated from this trade was immense. His villa was one of the largest and most opulent in all of Pompeii, a clear sign that the profits from his stinking factories could rival the inherited wealth of the old, land-owning elite. And like all Roman wealthy men, he used this wealth to pursue political power and social prestige. Inscriptions from around the city show that he used his fortune to fund public works and to sponsor political candidates, including his own son.
He had successfully converted the profits from the economy of fish sauce into real political influence, a classic example of the Roman path to power. The story of Aulus Umbricius Scaurus is the story of a Roman private sector in miniature. It reveals a world driven by ambition, competition, and sophisticated marketing. The Garum barons of the empire, men like Scaurus and Pompey, and their even bigger counterparts in Spain and North Africa, were the engines of a vast consumer economy. They were industrialists who understood supply chains, who invested in infrastructure, and who built powerful brands. They demonstrate that the Roman world was not just an empire of legions and laws, but also a vibrant and dynamic marketplace, a place where a clever entrepreneur could turn the guts of a fish into a golden fortune.
For centuries, the flavor of garum was the flavor of the Roman Empire itself, a ubiquitous and seemingly permanent fixture of daily life. The industrial machine that produced it was a masterpiece of logistics, its profitability a cornerstone of the private sector economy. But no industry, no matter how powerful, is immune to the great forces of history. The long decline and eventual disappearance of garum was not a single event, but a slow and complex unraveling, a death by 1,000 cuts. The same interconnectedness that had made the trade so successful also made it vulnerable. The story of garum's demise is the story of how a combination of political chaos, military disruption, and a profound cultural shift in taste can cause a global industry to simply vanish from the face of the earth, leaving behind only a ghost on the palette of history. The first major tremors to shake the garum industry began during the crisis of the 3rd century. This half-century of rolling civil war, barbarian invasions, and hyperinflation was a body blow to the entire Roman system. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace that had guaranteed the safety of the seas, collapsed. The Mediterranean, once a Roman lake, became a dangerous and contested space. Piracy, which had been ruthlessly suppressed for centuries, returned with a vengeance. For the garum trade, which was almost entirely dependent on long-distance maritime shipping, this was a catastrophe. A ship carrying a cargo of priceless, aged Garum Sociarum from Spain to Rome was a tempting, high-value target for any pirate fleet. The risks of the journey skyrocketed. Insurance costs would have become astronomical, and the reliable, predictable flow of goods that the industry depended on was shattered. The economic chaos of this period also had a devastating effect on the consumer base. Hyperinflation destroyed the savings of the middle classes, and the constant warfare disrupted the agricultural economy. The immense wealth that had once been concentrated in the cities of the empire began to dissipate. In this new, harsher economic reality, demand for high-end luxury goods plummeted. A senator struggling to pay his own private army was less concerned with acquiring the finest flower of garum. While the demand for cheap nutritional alec likely remained, the high-profit luxury end of the market, which had driven the industry's innovation and immense profitability, began to wither away. The great private enterprises, like the firm of Aulus Umbricius Scaurus, could not survive in this new environment of high risk and low demand. The final fatal blow to the industrial heartland of the garum trade was a direct result of the Western Empire's final collapse. In the early 5th century AD, the Vandal tribe, as we have seen in the story of the Annona, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and conquered the Roman provinces of North Africa and, crucially, southern Spain. The great Garum Coast, the industrial engine room of Hispania Baetica, was now in the hands of a hostile power. The factories of Baelo Claudia and Gades did not necessarily stop producing overnight, but their connection to their primary market, the Italian peninsula, was severed. The Vandal fleet now controlled the western Mediterranean, and the old, secure Roman trade routes were gone forever. The pipeline was definitively cut. In the post-Roman world, the so-called Dark Ages, the entire economic and social structure that had supported the garum industry vanished. The great unified consumer market of the Roman Empire fragmented into 1,000 small, localized, and largely self-sufficient feudal economies. The long-distance shipping networks collapsed. The great cities, the primary consumers of the mass-produced food, shrank dramatically. In population, there was simply no longer a market or a logistics system capable of supporting an industrial-scale transcontinental trade in a manufactured food product. Production, where it continued at all, became a local affair, a small-scale craft for local consumption, a shadow of its former industrial glory. But the most profound reason for Garum's disappearance was a fundamental shift in taste. The culinary world of the new European kingdoms, the Franks, the Goths, the Anglo-Saxons, was different. Theirs was a cuisine based on the products of the land, not the sea, on beer, not wine, on butter, not olive oil, and on the flavors of smoked meats and preserved vegetables, not fermented fish. The intense, pungent, umami-rich flavor of garum simply fell out of fashion. As the memory of Rome faded, so too did the taste for its signature flavor. A new culinary paradigm was taking hold, and there was no place in it for the ancient sauce. While the tradition of fermented fish sauce would live on in the East, in the West, the secret was almost entirely lost. The flavor that had once defined an empire had become, in the end, an acquired taste that no one was willing to acquire anymore.
Our investigation began with a single, elegant jar found in the ruins of Pompeii, a vessel that once contained a substance both desired and despised. We sought to understand how garum, a foul-smelling sauce of fermented fish, became a cornerstone of the Roman world. Having journeyed from the teeming fisheries of the Atlantic to the industrial factories of Spain, and having decoded the secrets of its production and trade, the evidence is now clear. The verdict is that garum was far more than a simple condiment. It was the signature product of a massive, sophisticated, and surprisingly modern industrial enterprise that reveals the hidden dynamism of the Roman private sector economy. We have established that the demand for garum was universal and absolute. It was driven by a dual engine. At the top of society, it was a gourmet ingredient, the indispensable source of umami for the complex flavors of elite cuisine. For the masses and the military, it was a vital and affordable nutritional supplement, a source of protein and essential salts that made a bland diet both palatable and survivable. This total market penetration, from the palace to the barracks, created a stable and immense consumer base. Our investigation has demonstrated that Roman entrepreneurs met this demand with a brilliant application of food technology and industrial organization. We have shown that the process of fermentation was not decay, but a controlled science of autolysis, a method of mass-producing a safe, stable, and flavorful product on a colossal scale. The archaeological evidence of the great factory cities, like Belo Claudia on the Spanish coast, with their batteries of massive fermentation vats, provides irrefutable proof of an industry that operated on a scale that would not be seen again until the modern era. Crucially, we have shown that this was a private sector triumph. We have uncovered a world of garum barons, sophisticated entrepreneurs like Aulus Umbricius Scaurus, who built immense fortunes through industrial efficiency and, most impressively, through modern marketing techniques. The evidence from the shipping amphora, the Tituli Picti, proves the existence of corporate branding, quality grading, and a complex logistical network that connected the producer to the consumer with remarkable precision. This was not a state-run monopoly, but a competitive capitalist market. Finally, we have charted the industry's decline, showing how this once unstoppable economic machine was vulnerable to the great forces of history. The collapse of the Pax Romana and the subsequent breakdown of safe maritime trade, combined with the Vandal conquests of its industrial heartlands, severed the supply chain. This, followed by a fundamental cultural shift in taste, caused the empire's signature flavor to vanish from the world. Therefore, the final conclusion of our investigation is this: the garum industry is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the sophistication and complexity of the Roman economy.
It proves the existence of a vibrant private sector capable of industrial-scale production, long-distance logistics, and sophisticated branding. Garum was the Coca-Cola of the Roman world, a standardized, mass-produced flavor that defined a civilization. Its story forces us to look beyond the legions and the aqueducts and to recognize the surprisingly modern engine of private enterprise that was a key pillar of the empire's prosperity.
The great garum factories of Baelo Claudia are silent now, their vats filled with sand instead of fermenting fish. The name of Aulus Umbricius Scaurus is a footnote in the archaeological record, and the flavor that once dominated the tables of a quarter of humanity has vanished so completely that we can only guess at its true taste. But the legacy of garum is not a ghost on the palate. It is a powerful and illuminating lesson about the very nature of civilization. The story of this industrial-scale commodity is a profound reminder that ancient trade was not just about the strategic necessities of grain and metal. It was also about the deeply human and immensely profitable business of culture, desire, and flavor. The garum industry fundamentally enriches our understanding of the Roman economy. It is a powerful counterpoint to the narrative of a state-run, top-down system. It reveals a world of ambitious entrepreneurs, of private capital investment, of fierce brand competition, and of a market that was responsive to the nuanced demands of a diverse consumer base. The garum barons were not just making a sauce, they were practicing a form of capitalism, building private enterprises whose scale and logistical sophistication challenge our preconceived notions of what was possible in the ancient world. They proved that the engine of the Roman world was not just the emperor's decree, but also the aggregate desires of 100 million consumers. The story of garum is also a story about food as technology. In a world without artificial preservatives or refrigeration, the ability to transform a highly perishable resource, fish, into a stable, nutrient-rich, and easily transportable product was a revolutionary achievement. The science of enzymatic fermentation, which the Romans perfected on an industrial scale, was as important a piece of their civilizational toolkit as concrete or the aqueduct. It was a technology that provided food security, enhanced nutrition, and created a tradable commodity that generated immense wealth. It reminds us that some of the most important innovations in human history have not been in weapons or architecture, but in the simple, vital business of how we feed ourselves. Finally, the disappearance of garum is a poignant lesson in the impermanence of taste. For 1,000 years, this flavor was a constant, a culinary through-line that connected the entire Roman world. Its loss was not just the loss of a recipe, it was the loss of a cultural bond, a shared sensory experience that helped to define what it meant to be Roman. Its story reminds us that culture is not just what we read or what we build, it is also what we eat. The flavors we crave, the foods we share, these are some of the most powerful and fundamental expressions of our identity. Thus, the silent, empty amphorae that litter the archaeological sites of the Roman Empire are not just containers, they are monuments to a lost industry and a lost flavor. They speak of a sophisticated consumer economy, of a remarkable mastery of food science, and of a commercial network that connected a Spanish fisherman to a British legionary through a shared, pungent taste. The story of the garum factories is a journey into the belly of the empire, a powerful reminder that to truly understand a civilization, we must understand not only its wars and its politics, but also the very flavor that was on its tongue.